Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a really fascinating deep dive into a theological breakdown of one of the absolute oldest stories in human history, the Garden of Eden. And you know, regardless of your personal background or beliefs, the source text we're unpacking today offers this incredibly systemic, objective look at how miscommunication fundamentally fractured human relationships. But even more importantly, it maps out a very specific framework for how to actually repair them.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We're going to move through 5 distinct phases, starting with the original harmony, moving right into disrupted communication, exploring what the text calls the 4 pillars, then examining a unique 4th pillar, and finally wrapping up with restoring symbiosis.
So, kicking things off with Section 1, Original Harmony, the Initial Garden Era.
To really set the stage here, the text highlights a super surprising detail about this initial era. God wasn't actually always physically present in the garden. Because of that, Adam was often just left alone with his thoughts. But these weren't just idle daydreams, right? His solitary reflections were intended to be direct reflections of God's words. He was positioned as the primary steward. Meanwhile, the woman was structurally designed to be a helpmate to support what the text calls the 4 quadrants of relationship, which is a framework we're going to break down in just a minute, but basically, this was the baseline human dynamic. It was a perfectly balanced, mediated system of communication and support.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Disrupted communication, the fall in the garden.
If we look at the timeline of the fall through the lens of this specific text, it really wasn't just about, eating a piece of forbidden fruit. It was fundamentally a catastrophic breakdown in a chain of communication. So Phase 1 starts with the divine command given directly to Adam, but in Phase 2, the serpent introduces deception, and then the critical failure happens right here in Phase 3. The text heavily emphasizes that the woman was tricked because she heard an altered word. She heard something totally different from the direct command Adam originally received. This targeted the very intermediary link between the creator, the man, and the woman. By injecting a manipulated word into that gap, it opened the door for Phase 4, the fall, which resulted in a massive rift in how humans relate to one another.
Notice just how drastically the whole dynamic changed here. We go from this fluid, shared action straight into complete fragmentation. The source text makes it incredibly clear, and this is absolutely crucial. Sin separates the man and woman's originality in symbiotic movement. Literally, let me repeat that, because it's the absolute core of this entire framework. Sin separates the man and woman's originality in symbiotic movement. You see, the manipulation of the word completely broke their natural fluid alignment. So instead of acting as one, this fracture caused a shifted positional relationship, the curse of labor, and just deep interpersonal friction. Basically, they were no longer moving together. Suddenly, they were moving in opposition.
Moving on to Section 3, the 4 pillars, maintaining righteousness.
So how do we fix this friction? Well, the text proposes a specific framework of structural pillars that both man and woman are meant to uphold. We've got the first 3 right here, and you'll notice that the overall objective is exactly the same for both. The first pillar is the relationship with God, which focuses on reclaiming that original divine connection. The second pillar is family and community, centering entirely on nurturing the human social bond. And the third pillar is tasks and vocation, which is all about the application of skills in the physical world. Both individuals fundamentally share these exact same 3 pillars as their baseline duty.
And now for Section 4, unique 4th pillar, diverging roles.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is where the framework introduces a super fascinating divergence. While the first 3 pillars are identical, the structural roles completely separate at this final stage. For a man, his 4th quadrant, his final pillar, is his ongoing relationship with creation itself, so it's outwardly focused on the world. But for the woman, her final pillar is defined internally. Her unique 4th pillar is defined strictly as a symbiosis with man. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to define what symbiosis means in this specific theological context. The text defines it as fluidity through shared action, thought, and skills. And listen, this isn't just some passive state. It acts as the vital mechanical link required to re-establish the severed connection. Remember what we talked about earlier, that sin separates the man and woman's originality in symbiotic movement? Well, this 4th pillar is the proposed antidote to that exact separation. It's about consciously returning to that state of frictionless fluidity. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, restoring symbiosis, mending the fracture. And this brilliantly illustrates the text's ultimate metaphor. The restoration of the human state is likened to the restoration of the rib.
Just as the text states the rib was originally taken from Adam to form the woman, that exact thing which was violently separated by miscommunication has to be intentionally restored. The text argues that this requires reuniting as one in absolute fluidity. Structurally, this relies heavily on the woman's willingness to actually operate within that fourth pillar of symbiosis. By consciously aligning their skills and their thoughts, that original fracture, the one caused by deception back in the garden, is structurally mended.
And just to clarify the exact nature of this restoration, the text makes a really crucial distinction here. It explicitly states this is not a call to a purely romantic union, but to a brother and sister alignment of action, thought, and purpose. So actually, scratch the whole modern Hollywood romance ideal. The source is advocating for a highly functional, deeply purposeful partnership. It elevates structural alignment over just romance. It's essentially about two individuals working side by side, perfectly in sync in their actions and thoughts to rebuild what was broken.
So, what does this all mean for us? Well, it leaves us with a pretty profound concept to chew on. Whether you view this text as literal historical fact or as a really deep structural metaphor for the human condition, the mechanics of its solution are undeniably compelling. The breakdown of communication causes friction and separation, right? But the conscious alignment of thought and action brings fluidity and repair. So as you look at your own modern collaborative relationships, whether that's in your family, your community, or your vocations, ask yourself, how might consciously aligning your actions and your purpose mend the fractured dynamics in your own life? It's a real game changer of a framework to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.